Hi, it's Chris Watkin here, and I am with one of the most well-known estate agents and thought leaders of the UK estate and letting agency industry, Ed Mead, ex-MD, chief boss of Douglas & Gordon, the very well-known London estate agency, and now Bossman of Viewber. Ed, thanks for joining me today. You've kind of been there and done that with the previous property crashes where property transactions dropped. And you had to change your the way you worked. I'd like to spend 10 or 20 minutes of your very valuable time live from your kitchen table or your dining room table to talk about your thoughts of estate agents watching this, what they could be doing. I mean, particularly I'd like to talk about, let's start with working from home. Let's talk about viewings, because obviously you're part of you run the Viewber, so that's what can we be doing now? We're filming this on Thursday. What did you do in the last crash? That's not to say there's going to be another crash, but there's definitely going to be some reduction in property transactions. So I'd be interested in what you did at Douglas & Gordon, and then finally how you managed expectations of landlords and vendors and buyers and sellers. So let's kick off. Thanks for joining me, by the way.
Not at all. No, thanks for having me, Chris. Always enjoy talking to you, and a great opportunity really to talk, bearing in mind that actually you say it's Thursday. It's actually Thursday, the 26th of March, and the Prime Minister's announcement on Monday was only 3 days ago. So a lot of you, things may perhaps have sunk in a little bit by the time you listen to this, but certainly as Chris and I speak, there's still a lot of shock, a lot of people not knowing what to do. I mean, my LinkedIn traffic has almost dropped to zero when normally there's about 50 or 60 interactions a day. So it is a shocking period. So shocking period is the wrong word. You just have to live a day at a time at the moment. And the important thing for most people is to put personal health before business health. That's the way we've all had to look at it. So let's talk about the working from home thing for a second, Chris, because you mentioned that first. And I think that I perhaps have had some slightly unusual experience of this, in that I've lived in an office environment for 37 years and absolutely loved it. The banter, it's all part of life. It's why you get into it. It's why you enjoy agency. You get with a good team, and I've been working in some fantastic teams. So suddenly to go for working from home feels great to start with. 20 years ago, if you said you were working from home, people would think you were taking the PISS and you were going home to put your feet up and watch the test match. Nothing could be further from the truth. The difficulty with working from home is trying to get rid of that Victorian work ethic and work efficiently. Most people, when they start working from home, they work 9-10 hours a day solidly because they feel a little bit guilty and they think they should be doing more. And that's just rubbish. The fact is, you save yourself commuting time. You save yourself commuting time in the evenings. It's a really good environment in which to work. And I think it is one thing which will change the way people work when this whole COVID-19 crisis has passed. I really do. I think people can be more efficient. But it's about your mental health.
What advice would you give to people, going through this first week? I know both you and I have worked from home for many years now, and it doesn't feel hardly any different. But those guys that are virgins to working from home.
Yeah, it's the usual thing. Treat your hours as if you're working. Routine is everything. Don't think you can get an extra 30 minutes in bed. Get up at a normal time. Maybe allow yourself a little bit less to get rid of the commuting time, but don't think of it as a time to get extra kip. Make absolutely sure you split up your working area from your living area. If you're working from home, I'm like everybody else. I'm working from home with my partner, my wife in my case. We have lunch together so that we sort of socialize, and there's that time there when you feel that it's what you'd normally do at lunchtime. 5 minutes, 10 minutes every hour, go and do something different. What I do is every now and then I will go and literally lie in my bed and read a book for 10, 15 minutes, because it just gets my head completely out of what I'm doing here at work. I mean, I'm pie-eyed at the moment. I feel like I've been on these video calls for the last week solidly, and it's just so easy to do that. And don't mix your life up.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've learned is that you can actually get sucked into too much to work, and especially if you're living with your partner. But if you don't actually interact time with him or her, you will actually end up winding them up, and an unhappy home is not what you want, is it?
Yeah, and an enormous number of people out there. The thing is, everyone thought this working from home thing, just send everyone home, they can work from home. That's fine, but they've closed the schools. So if you've got young kids, your kids are around, that makes it a nightmare. A lot of people then it means all the bedrooms are full, so you can't go and sit in a bedroom and do it, rather like I've got the luxury of doing here. My kids are older and left home. So there's a lot of stuff to think about. So if you have got kids, make time, let your boss know, or your manager, whatever, know that you can't do it all the time because you've got kids. That's the way it works.
And it doesn't really matter if the kid's not screaming, but, it doesn't have to be an environment which is perfectly quiet. If you've got the kids in the background, that everyone respects that. Just say, look, I've got the kids with me,
Well, that's true, but I think you're better off doing this in concentrated bursts. I think if you are working from home, finding a quiet space, even if that means you have to end up going and sitting in the shed at the end of the garden. I mean, if you can get mobile signal, or you can get and you can tether your phone. Bear in mind, for a lot of people, that you don't just need Wi-Fi. If you're in an area which has got good 4G, most data plans these days people have on their mobiles are very good. So you can go and sit in your shed if the weather's warm enough and do it from there. Just tether your phone to your laptop and do your calls that way.
Well, I actually find that my 4G signal is actually quicker than Virgin cable.
Yeah, so there are lots of modern things. I mean, I'm a bit older than you are, Chris, so it's taken me a bit more time to catch up with all this stuff. I was about to use a different word, but actually it's cool once you get used to it.
So what else, what other advice would you give? Let's go through the mental state of working from home. It's not easy, is it?
No, and I found it very difficult. I have to say, I often find myself wanting to tear what little hair I've got left out, and I find that it's necessary. Normally, you can change your routine. I can go out, meet people, do stuff, whatever it is. You can't do that at the moment. So make sure you do have one or two mates, have some stupid fun, have a scheduled video call for 10, 15 minutes at lunchtime.
Yeah, it's interesting. A few of us have actually got together and a bit of bants, especially with Zoom. It's amazing. We should have bought shares in Zoom. Let's move on. What work can we be doing? Let's talk about viewings. At the moment, your firm is a viewings firm. I bet you've got loads of Viewber people out there that are gagging to get out of the house, out from underneath of their other half. But
well, the first thing we did on Tuesday morning after the announcement from the Prime Minister on Monday evening was to go to all our Viewbers, offer them a webinar, and we had hundreds of Viewbers on the webinar, which was fantastic. We've got several thousand of them all over the UK, and what amazed me was the number of them that were prepared to work, subject to the appropriate social distancing and barrier protection, all that sort of stuff. The issue for us is about putting people's health before business health. So we wanted to enter the spirit of it. Despite a lot of clients saying, can you help? Can you do this? Can you do that? We said no. Every time a Viewber goes out the door, it's a risk. There's a risk of infection. So we had to do the right thing and say, just suspend all operations, which is really painful for us. We've been going 3.5 years, but I'm not alone. There are lots of people in the same situation. So for us, the next step, Chris, sorry, I can see you trying to say something, but the real issue for us at the moment is what the government considers to be essential. There's still, the government's rammed at the moment. They've got so much going on, I get it, but it would be really helpful if someone in MHCLG would tell us what is officially essential and what isn't, because when we got a business, we'd love to be doing some things for some of our clients, but we can't do it because we aren't told what's essential or not.
Well, I must admit, I've been quite impressed that, those behind the scenes, the men in grey suits were actually able to persuade the Chancellor to do rates for estate and letting agents. So obviously, there are people out there, and I'm sure the likes of David Cox and the Arla and A&E Property Mart boys will move forward on that one. What do you think NEGs could actually be doing now, though? NEGs and valuers?
Well, I mean, there's a very sensible saying that I've worked by for a long time, and I've been through a number of disasters. I've been back to 3 or 4 big recessions, September the 11th, and obviously what's going on now. And what people remember, they never remember what you did to them, but they always remember the feeling that it gave them. So in a disaster like this, I mean, we've all been reading about the sort of PR disaster that really was Dexter's, for instance, who didn't close themselves down and felt there was an opportunity to take advantage of the situation to some extent. I'm not denigrating Dexter's, but from a PR perspective, that was a very poor move. And people remember. So if you've got NEGs that are sitting around doing nothing, they can be contacting clients saying, I'm really sorry about this. There's nothing we can do about it. We're all in this together. How are you? Is there anything you need? Have you got, just being human about it.
So we're not actually ringing people up and saying, are you still looking for a house? Because that won't go down well, will it? You're just ringing them up and basically saying, how are you? How are you doing?
Yeah.
What are your potential plans for the next couple of years?
But it's what we do anyway as agents, Chris. You know perfectly well. You know, we are not just, it's not about showing houses. We're everything from counsellors to drivers to, you know, shoppers. We do all sorts of stuff for our people anyway. You want to be doing it for our potential clients or buyers, but most of our clients at the moment treat them like human beings, see if they're okay.
So we've got the time, we've got the money. Not the no, you know, the government are paying people's 80% of people's wages. Again, that could be considered. I don't know if that, because they shouldn't actually be working, should they? If they're sent home on a furlough.
No, well, that's an extremely good point. The furlough rules are very ambiguous, not ambiguous. They're ambiguous in the way they help people, because from our point of view at Viewber, a lot of our people said they'd be happy to work for 50% of wages. But of course, we'd have to pay the 50% wages with zero income. On furlough, we don't pay them anything. The government pays them 80%, but they can't interact with us at all, which is really frustrating. I wonder whether there is room. Certainly if this goes on, I'm fairly sure the government will look at that again.
Could be a missed opportunity. Now, when you were head of D&G, and we're not saying there's going to be a property crash, but I do genuinely believe there'll be a sudden drop in transactions. What did you do with your branches to ensure that you had a business that came out the other end?
Well, I was part of the team that was running D&G, and actually in 0809, I was running the Central London offices. So it was a very specific issue actually in Central London. I know people thought it was going to affect everybody, but actually initially it was very much a Central London problem. And of course, it was slightly different in Central London because the exchange rate dropped and you've got a lot of foreigners coming in. So there was a V-shaped recovery. However, what we did specifically at that time was that we knew that lettings were going to be very busy. So we retrained, we did retrain quite a number of our sales negs to move into lettings, number one. But we had to be a bit creative in terms of where people were working, which offices they were working in, which were the busy offices, having people more mobile, moving around. And actually, we ended up with a lot of accidental landlords. So it was also a question of trying to speak to people who we were selling for and turning around to them and saying, look, you know, try and turn them into landlords. A lot of them didn't have any choice. They were selling, they were moving anyway. Perhaps find them something to go and rent out their properties rather than selling it for them. So it's just a question of repurposing.
We've already had a bite of that apple, though, haven't we? You know, we can't go again at that.
Well, it's a very different situation at the moment because everything stopped. And the fact of the matter is, everything all right there, Chris? Just want to make sure you're going to survive. The issue is that everything's gone together. It's not as if, I mean, because what happened in 0809 was that all those sales dropped, rentals shot up. Now everything's just stopped. So it's a very different ballgame, hence why the government, to their credit, have stepped in and done what they can to underpin what's happening. So the 0809 thing was slightly different in that, and the other thing, of course, was that was a financial instrument that had collapsed that created that disaster.
Okay, so I mean, if you were back at Douglas and Gordon, let's be honest, over the last few years, I think a few agents have got a little bit plump and a little bit fat. Do you think this is an opportunity for firms to reassess the way they work? I mean, I'm of the opinion, I think the self-employed model will actually kick in after this.
Well, I hope that people don't use the opportunity to hide behind COVID-19. I mean, I think there are some companies out there that might be a little bit cynical about this and use it as an opportunity to lay people off. It's like burying bad news. You know, it's a good time to be burying bad news. I do think it's going to be radically different. I think afterwards, people are now in the current environment being forced to do things that they wouldn't have dreamt of doing before. So working from home is just one of them, but using different forms of technology when they can't, you know, virtual tours, live viewing tours, this sort of stuff. I'm talking about obviously the stuff that we're familiar with at Viewber. But I think there are an awful lot of people who are being introduced to things that they weren't being introduced to before. And they're suddenly thinking, well, actually, hang on a minute, that does work. So I think there could be a little bit of a change in the way people work. The self-employed model, perhaps, whether you get a different sort of person with a self-employed, you know, the self-employed model, can they still go into the office? Do they still get the banter? Do they still get all the stuff that's made the estate agency business work the way it has? Because actually estate agents are people that work with emotional intelligence. It's all about emotional intelligence.
Because let's be honest, the type of person that's attracted to estate agents is more of a people person as a process person, and they need that banter. That's...
Yeah. And I'm not necessarily sure whether you know, if you're self-employed, it's quite a punt, you know, looking after your own affairs, dealing with stuff means you've got to have a grasp of paperwork and and doing things in a certain ordered way. And certainly most of the agents I know, and actually me myself, I used to like somebody else to organize all of that, and I was a very good front man. I like to just get out and do the deals and then hand it over to someone who could cope with the crap. So you know, and whether the self-employed people are the right people for that, I don't know. I mean, I've got a big issue. I've loved what you do, Chris, in terms of your videos, and I know you've talked to a lot of people from some of these bigger self-employed style operations. I think the issue for most of those guys is whether they're going to advertise the names enough to get them known. It's all very well turning around.
Well, my biggest issue is that most estate agents are actually totally appalling at self-generating their own business because they fear rejection. And unless you can get over that fear, then self-employed agency isn't for you. It's quite interesting talking to a couple of the big boys off camera. They said when they started off, it was almost like having a creche of valuers, because they would roll in, learn their script practice in the morning, and then not go out door knocking or business generating because you haven't got the benefit of a name.
No, exactly. And I'm afraid I don't think that model's necessarily going to work so well unless they start spending some heavy money generating leads. Because once you've got the leads, fine. But door knocking, you know, for every, I've watched some of your, well, a lot of your videos, and you know, to get one yes from 10 no's, that's real, from 9 no's, that's really tough. That's really tough.
It is, especially if you are a people person that fears rejection. Let's move on. Do you have any strong opinions either way with regard to Portalgate last week?
Yes, what a balls up. I mean, it's just, the trouble is, I think people have been caught up. I mean, I think what happened to them and then maybe what's happened to Dexter since has really given people quite a shock, because I don't think anyone quite expected the required reaction to the existing crisis to be, give us everything for free. And it's sort of, there's almost been a race to the bottom. You've seen a lot of suppliers saying, yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that. Zoopla jumped on the bandwagon, On the Market jumped on the bandwagon. And I think it's a little bit unseemly. I think the whole thing, I was guilty of it myself and the team at Viewber. We rushed to send out messages to a lot of our clients saying, look, we can do things if you really think they're emergencies and whatever it is. And a lot of our clients were coming back and saying, well, what do you think is an emergency? Oh, we think this is an emergency. Do you agree? Actually, sit back, relax, look after your clients, make sure they understand that you're doing the right thing by the country. Don't sort of have knee-jerk reactions. And I think it's been, yeah, I don't think a lot of people realized it will be quite as heavy. To be fair, Rightmove didn't start from a terribly popular position to start with, so they only have themselves to blame, I think.
Interestingly, now there's probably 4 or 5 horses that are out running saying, ditch Rightmove and come to us. That's what I've come across. It'd be interesting to see what happens. I mean, some people...
Well, I think the ones that are free, you know, there are companies like One Dome and some of these new guys that have started up that have really suddenly, you know, I would have thought for them. I was talking actually to their CEO yesterday, and he had as many inquiries in the day after Portalgate blew up as they had in the previous week. So it's clearly had an effect for some people.
Interesting times ahead. I think people have to, I've been interviewing some agents, and I think the best thing you can actually do is using this time is to go through every let and sale and find out exactly where the lead came from, using logic as opposed to emotion, because I think a lot of people are running, their hearts are running their heads.
Yeah, but agents aren't very good at that. That's the trouble. I mean, you know, they really aren't. And when you say to them, where did the lead come from? They say, oh, the website. But people don't understand the website. Where did they see it advertised? Yeah. Sure, everyone ends up at the flipping website, but how do they find the website link?
What the neg tick the box, and you know the neg always ticks the one at the top, whatever that is.
Yeah, well, they shouldn't be offered website as an opportunity. I remember at D&G, we really had that problem. We thought 90% are coming from the website. Great, that's really good. They're all coming from our website. And then someone said, well, how are they finding the website? So agents are learning every bit as much as the negs.
Well, what things, what forsooths? Because let's be honest, there's not many people in the industry with a name as big as yours. What forsooths would you say to an agent who's, you know, 1 week into this lockdown, wondering, you know, sales pipeline on ice, wondering what the hell to do? What final words of wisdom would you give to them, Ed?
Well, look, it is going to lift. I mean, you know, at Viewber, what we're doing is but there are certain lead indicators, companies like Lead Forensics, for instance, which is one of these companies that allows you to look at your website and see who's visiting it. If you suddenly see that there is clearly a spike coming up and there's a thing in the press saying we think lockdown's going to end on this date or whatever it is, just get yourself ready for that time. Because if you've got furloughed workers, some of them are going to have to come back. Do you think your business is going to come back with a bang? Or do you think it's going to come back in dribs and drabs? Have your people ready, you know. If I'm absolutely sure with the furlough provisions, you're allowed to do chats with the people who are working with you in the same way that if this situation was in your office, you get down the pub with them, you know, keep in touch with them. So for me, it's a question of keeping the people you love, the people who you really like from work close. But from as I say, from our business perspective, we know that at some point this is going to be perhaps a phased lifting of the restrictions, and therefore Viewber needs to be ready to help people who are coming out of those restrictions, but the people are still at home. So we think it could be a very busy period. And a lot of people who've been using us have said, you know, they're keeping in touch saying, when can we start? When can we start? When can we start? That's what, as an agent, you need to be generating. You need to be getting ready. I mean, I think the figures were last week. I think there were quite a lot of people listing. And I know a number of deals have been done this week. I was talking to a buying agent yesterday who I completely trust in London, who's done 3 exchanges this week. And I think there are a lot of people on social media who are going, oh, you should stop doing this, stop doing that. But, you know, people have to get on with their lives.
I think the magic thing is that for the next 3 or 4 weeks, I'm recommending agents actually start being empathetic in their local community, using the power of social media, not putting posts out saying business as usual, but asking for people's help or giving help, talking about the community, talking to local people, and actually giving extra value, because that's what people will remember you by when we come out the other side, and we will come out the other side. You know, both of us can remember, you know, back in the 70s, you know, it was 3-day weeks and the electricity went off at night. You know, God forbid if that happened now, lost the internet, there'll be riots on the streets. So we've been there, done it, and we'll be through there again. I wish everyone out there with whose families, you know, I've got a father-in-law that if he gets it, you know, he's got terminal cancer. So if he gets it, he's a goner. But that's just the way of the world, isn't it? Unfortunately, and you know, that's it, isn't it? We've all.
I mean, I've got my father's 90. He lives nearby. He came around the other day, and he stopped at the top of the stopped at the top of the hill there, and you know, yeah, as you say, it's all about people's health first, business second. And I don't think anyone, Chris, is going to start thinking seriously again about what they've got to do for another few days. They just need to absorb it, let this sink in, but then they need to plan for this beginning to ease and lift off.
Can I thank you for your time today, Ed? And really just, thank you, mate. I wish you well with Viewber. A lot of people love you guys, love you. And I wish you well, and I wish every agent watching it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Chris. And I hope everybody stays well. Thank you.